There was honestly a period of about 3 years where I posted every day. I remember being on the golf course being like, I need to post something on LinkedIn, which was getting a bit obsessive. Everyone knows that the designs are the same. We use the same suppliers. Everyone does the same thing. The differentiator is the people. You need either to be that person or very well linked to the person that just gets exactly what's going on in the business. Workplace is the brand. Workplace 3000 is an arm of that brand. It's the podcast. We're very much focusing on education, inspiration, and like the creative side of the industry. One thing that you shouldn't do, don't just copy what someone else is doing. Try and find something that's different, because it's just so easy for people to copy. If you are kind of clueless and you just know that you need to do it, engage with someone that can help you do that. You can make it very, very serious. You can turn off a lot of people and you can create a lot of boring stuff.
Tom Hitch.
All right, mate.
Welcome to the podcast.
The shoe's on the other foot.
I
Feels
know.
weird being over it.
I was thinking of an intro on the way up here, and I was thinking the only one I've got is, this is the first time for me a podcaster has podcasted with a fellow podcaster.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right, and it just feels a bit strange. I think me and you, we've had a lot of chats, haven't we, where we've shared tips and our experiences, because again, you're the only other person that I know really that's had a lot of podcast experience, and we've got our ways about doing a podcast and how we like to prep, and I've not really done a lot of prep today. No. So I haven't done my homework, so it always feels a bit weird, but no, very happy to do it, and yeah, nice to meet you in real life.
Finally, like I was saying to you earlier, you are my longest serving digital friend.
Yeah, well,
probably connected.
That feels like a very nice title to have earned. But yeah, it's many years ago, isn't it? It's I mean, we don't need to go into the weeds of it, but I remember when you first messaged, that was a nice message to receive, and it's nice to see that you've kind of gone on and actually done what you said you were going to do. Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Because again, we'll speak about it today, but the difficulty of starting a podcast is super difficult. So messaged you with some advice, was like, Tom, I know you've got this and this, like, can you give us a bit of advice? Thinking of starting one on the industry as well, so yeah. The help is gladly received. So mine's a little bit different obviously than what yours is.
Sure.
So I always like to go back to the start, mate. If you can tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about you when you were younger, and sort of how you worked your way into the D&B industry as such.
Yeah, I mean, where do you even start with that? I guess like the poignant stuff is, media wise, never really that bothered by media and content marketing. I was good at English, and that was really kind of my stepping stone, if you want to call it that. Had a very late, I feel like I didn't start work until I was about 25. I was messing around for a long time. I lived in Denmark for a couple of years.
Oh, did you? You look, I'll be honest with you, you do look slightly Danish. I don't know whether that's because you've just said you lived in Denmark, but you give me a Danish twang.
I'll take that all day long. Yeah, so I was there for a couple of years. And then when I came back, I just knew that, I'd been travelling, I'd been in Denmark, and I was like, I need to actually do something. Don't know what that is. Got a job in, it was like, how would you even describe it? It was like a replica furniture company. There you go, writing copy for that. It was Danish. I was like, cool, it's a decent starting salary, but quickly unraveled that company was not a very good one. Probably just going to leave that there, to be perfectly honest with you. Had some very questionable behaviour from myself, where I would tell my mates like what my job was like and what I get up to, and they're like, that's not a job. I was like, well, I'm getting a salary, so it is, but yeah, that was a good one to get out of. But this is kind of relevant actually to the start in D&B, is that I remember applying for a content writing job, a blog writer job. I think it was blog writer was the title of the job, whilst I was doing this job for, I think I was only there for 8 months, but I was like, I need to get out, applying for all these jobs. And I remember speaking to a recruiter, and she was like, everything looks really good, experience looks good, they're really interested to meet you, but the only bad thing about this is that it's based in Wimbledon, and where you're working at the moment is Ladbroke Grove. I was like, okay, well, the good thing is that I'm actually living way closer to Wimbledon than I live here, so I'm actually commuting like 2.5 hours to get here. And then that firm was Peldon Rose, and obviously I had no idea who they were, what D&B was. Literally all I did was like, okay, well, I can write blogs, I've been writing about furniture and design, I can probably do that. And that was basically the start of whatever this career is now.
And there's no chat GPT back then, so I assume you're actually writing the blogs.
It was very much writing the blogs, and just, I don't know, I think like marketing in this sector was, there's a lot to probably say about that later on, to be fair, but at the time it was very sort of primitive. It was, do your social media, do your emails, do your blogs, and that was kind of it. A few events, but mate, I had no idea really what I was getting into with that at that point in time.
So what did Martin look like that back then in our industry?
I mean, to be fair, it's probably the biggest change now is that there's a lot more like digital strategy, or like paid strategies, SEO, PPC, all that sort of stuff is a much bigger playing field than it was then. It was still a thing. I mean, we're not talking like yonks ago. We're probably only talking like I left. So that was in 2016 when I started that job. So obviously nearly 10 years. A lot has changed in that time. But I think the biggest thing really is that it wasn't as digital, and still really to this day I'm not. I know the primitive, like the basic stuff that you need to know, but I'm not like a digital whiz. My specialism now is in content, but yeah, it was just a lot more like, I don't know, like just a lot more basic. Like it worked, it's not like it didn't work, but there was a lot of like printed materials and like old-fashioned stuff, which again, some of the stuff that I still see now is still doing that. So how old-fashioned is it? But yeah, it probably wasn't that dissimilar, mate, but I think that it's more just about that digital side now, the video side massively. I remember videos being like kind of feeling like a revolutionary idea in like 2017. I think that was when we were like, okay, well, we don't have video case studies, we should do that. I'm not going to say that I'm the first one to start video case studies in D&B, but if I wasn't the first, I was definitely one of the first. And I remember that being like radical,
groundbreaking, being
like, people like the sales guys there being like, this is amazing, this is really helpful. I'm like, yeah, cool, we'll just keep doing them then. So yeah, as I say, I don't think it's not changed hugely, but I think more companies are better at it now than they were. I think back then there was probably some companies that were better than others, and they sort of reaped the rewards, but now like the playing field is ridiculous and it's very, very competitive. And yeah, you talk about heads of content and digital, like head of digital, all the other job titles that kind of come with that wouldn't have existed 10 years ago, all are very much sort of part and parcel of D&B companies now. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know in that respect. But yeah, it probably has moved a lot quicker than I've realised. But yeah, as I say, like going back to getting into that role, a lot of people, and I'm sure you've had this and will have this with your other interviews, is a lot of people say they just fell into D&B.
Yes.
And it's true. Like I had no idea what it was. I went to uni I studied English. I didn't go there to be like, okay, cool, I'm going to go and work as a marketer in D&B. And I'm sure lots of other people did this, the same thing and just fell into it. But it's worked out pretty well. And I think, there's a lot of interesting people. It's a very interesting industry. And yeah, I mean, I'm feel very lucky that I managed to get in at that stage, because
I suppose back then 2017 was it Peldon Road?
2016 May 2016 was when I started there.
And with someone with your like your skill set and talent back then, that was probably quite a fresh approach to the industry. And I suppose when the guys at Peldon Road took you on, I don't know if I'm not saying they were taking a chance, but I suppose with your, like, you got video case studies and you pretty much said you were the only one who were doing them back then, even though you tried to avoid saying that you weren't.
I tried to sort of stay humble on those sort of things, but no, I think, to be honest though, I was not what I am now then. I think if I'd tried to go in with, okay, we're going to do like hosted video tours and a podcast, that would have like blown everyone's mind.
I don't think Joe Rogan was doing podcasts back then, was he?
Probably not, mate. Well, I mean, maybe, but like, it wasn't a thing, and that's been one of those things that had to come out recently. But I think that it was just an opportunity. Like literally, it was a case of like, we need someone that's going to write blogs. That slotted into that strategy, and that was what it was. And it was only when you're in there you kind of go, okay, well, how about we do this, or how about that? And like, I think I talk about Peldon Road with a lot of positivity, really. There was a lot of good stuff there. I was there for nearly 4 years. A lot of very influential people there in terms of like helping me be what I am now. So I'm very grateful to those people and for that opportunity. So I think it was just one of those ones where we just got on really well, and they're very famous for their culture and their people. And I think that was a big part in making that a really great experience. So it helped me definitely grow into become, whatever it is I am now, as this kind of marketing content guy. So yeah, I think it was not so much a punt in terms of like the ability, but in terms of what I could do at that time, I could do that. It was just so happened that there was just a huge opportunity for them to do things in a different way and kind of help open their eyes a little bit to the opportunities that they had in front of them.
So tell us, if you can, a little more in depth about your career there. So you were there for 4 years, and you started just writing blogs for the guys there. So how did you like grow in your role there, and where did you get to after year 4 or such?
I mean, it's weird to think back to it, really. Like, it's not really that long ago, but it feels like a absolute lifetime ago. Started writing blogs. I mean, this is a funny one that has just popped into my mind, and this will kind of give you a flavour of what was going on at that time. This is literally zero criticism of anything other than I think that this is where D&B marketing was in that period of time. I remember writing a blog. Oh man, I remember writing a blog or like a news post about National Tape Measure Day.
Christ, is that a thing?
At the time, I was like, yeah, this is a normal thing. It's National Tape Measure Day.
Yeah.
Builders use tape measures. That makes sense. I think about that now. It's embarrassing. So I actually feel upset talking about it now. Like, I don't know where that's kind of come out of a bit of a closet that I'd stored that away in. But like
what do you even like? What does a blog consist of a national tape measure? Like, what can you write about? I think
it will still exist somewhere.
Yeah.
So if anyone can be bothered to find it, it will probably be on there somewhere. Hopefully it's been deleted. But I mean, I don't think it was necessarily a blog. It must have been a news post. It just basically said, it's National Tape Measure Day. Tape measures are great for measuring things. And if you need to measure something, use one of those. It was weird. But ultimately, like, moving on from that, there was a lot of great stuff in terms of, I would say, like, I touched on it, like this exposure to people and like people being like very influential there. There's a lot of really good sales people there and a lot of really good designers, and they were just brilliant to learn from. And I think that's probably where the development came from, was understanding the process. You know, people talk about understanding D&B language, understanding the industry, and you know, you can be a great marketer in D&B without actually really understanding D&B, which might not make sense. But if you have great marketing skill sets, really, if you were put in front of, you know, I don't know, products like if you had to sell cheese or you had to sell hammers, if you knew how to execute a digital strategy, you could do it.
Fair.
You don't need to understand everything about cheese and hammers, right?
Yeah.
It's the same for D&B, and I think that at the time, that was probably what helped me the most, was that I found it interesting. There were some great people to learn from, great people to ask like information about and actually get to learn. And yeah, I think being supported, going to sites, going to just see projects, that was probably pretty massive in what made it into, you know, okay, well, let's do videos, let's do interviews, let's do case studies better, let's do more of those, let's, you know, look at opportunities to kind of represent the business better, rather than just sort of saying, oh, you know, here's National Tape Measure Day. It was cutting the legs off something that was actually really, really impressive. And so yeah, that just allowed me to kind of do it was, to be honest, really like the takeaways from that was like the video case study stuff, I'd say, was probably the biggest thing, and writing the case studies. And you know, we had some guides and documentation there that was great. But you know, so I wasn't really on social media then. I think like LinkedIn I wasn't using then, like that was just not a thing. So coming out of that, basically just got headhunted by ML, Morgan Lovell, to do, I mean, I'm pretty sure like the conversation I had was like, do what you're doing there, but here. But
come here and do it.
And that was that. So I moved there just before COVID.
Tell us about, like, you mentioned there about the video case studies. So like video case studies nowadays they're pretty much a film. Like, they're cinematic, there's different angles, there's, you know, like high quality B-roll in between it. So like a video case study nowadays is, you know, like I said, like really cinematic. So like, what did they look like 7-8 years ago? Are we talking like Samsung on a stand? And
yeah, no, I mean, to be fair, like it was probably the equipment, you know, the equipment that was just less good than it is now. I personally don't love video case studies anymore. I think because one, everyone can do them.
Yep, true.
And two, like that static shot of a client saying, "Oh, these guys were so good." Well, obviously they're going to say that. They're not gonna not say that. But yeah, as I say, at the time, I think, you know, we just had a couple of cameras, some pretty basic mic packs, and it was just an interview, really, just like talk about the story of the project. You know, how it's impacted you, all the standard stuff, you know, like what's been the biggest change for this space. And I think it was less about like the actual output of what they were saying. It was just like people needed collateral, and that was the difference, is that they didn't have any before and all of a sudden they did. So, we made it a bit more adventurous, and you start getting into time lapse, which I absolutely hate because it's an absolute nightmare, and it's so easy to go wrong, and it's not really worth it. But there was an obsession with time lapse for many years where people were like, okay, well, let's get, there was something like 12, 15 time lapse cameras knocking around with SD cards, and it was just ridiculous. But again, that was like kind of that adventurous side of it, to go, okay, well, how do we capture the process? How do we show people that? And that's really what that was about. It was just the actual execution was an absolute nightmare. And then, really, I guess like just doing more like profile pieces, and I think just trying to tell the story of the business. I think it was just like a bit of a gateway, really, to be like, okay, well, there's this new world of media that we're not using. And, obviously lots of people have kind of taken it in different ways, and there's been some really good stuff, and some companies have, gone one way with it, others another. But I think that's the beauty of it, right, is that it doesn't, you talked about being cinematic, and you talked about it being shot in certain ways. Like that's kind of the good side of it, is that everyone can kind of put their own flavour on it. But that was then basically what I ended up then doing at Morgan Lovell, was that they didn't really have digital assets, digital content, and then they did, because I went there and we just did the same thing.
So you basically just brought your skill set over to Morgan Lovell.
Yeah.
And then how long were you at Morgan Lovell for?
Not that long, mate. I was only there for like 18 months, maybe just over. But there's a lot of stuff I could say about that. I'm not going to.
Fair enough.
I joined just before COVID.
Yeah.
Probably the best thing that came out of Morgan Lovell was it forced me to start doing LinkedIn. So I remember I think it was March 2020, I was like, can't do any of the stuff I've been brought in here to do. If I actually want to keep a job, I'm going to need to think of like a way of creating impact.
Yeah.
And so I started posting. I remember having something like 1,300 connections on LinkedIn. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to just take this building looks nice. We just shot this recently. I'm going to talk about that. And then that was the snowball of LinkedIn.
So you are probably one of the most followed people, I'd say, on LinkedIn. And I know followers are vanity metrics, but still, you still get engagement off it. And, eventually it could drive business or relationships that could lead to business. So, we were speaking on the way up here as well, me and Joe, about like the follower side of social media and LinkedIn. We're talking about your profile, how well followed it is. And it's got this stigma around a vanity metric being followed, which is a shame. But followers can convert to whatever you need them to convert to. You can convert them.
Sure.
So you've started your LinkedIn. Let's dive into that. So you've started that 0 followers, 1,300. How did it snowball to? It's 30,000 now.
27,000.
You know the exact number.
27,282.
You're pretending you don't know.
It's definitely 27. Only good. Do you know what? Because I was writing something the other day and it was old. And we updated it and it said 25, and I was like, that's gone up, so let's change that. But no, it is 27. Do you know what? It's weird. Like, it's just, I think a lot of people look at that, and I've had various conversations over the years, people go, basically, I want that, I want what you're doing. And I don't think people really appreciate, and I know that we'll sort of feel the same on this, people don't really appreciate the effort that goes into that. So I think there was honestly a period of about 3 years where I posted every day by like 2 days. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, it was getting a bit obsessive, but I could see that it was working, and so I just kind of kept going. But I think that also, like, there wasn't really anyone, and they're not really a lot of people still now that are doing it. A lot.
In fact, I'd say you're probably the only person in our industry as such who has that type of following, and is posting really good content as well, and getting good engagement as well.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that like people don't know the ag that it goes into. Like, I'd imagine back then you were pumping out the connection request every day, probably maxing out your connection request every day, posting and copyright and post as well. Like, that takes a short while to like get the photos you want to put up, copyright the post down. It's like a mini part-time job trying to run
for sure. It absolutely is. And so first of all, like, it's a really good point about, I remember the point where I could stop adding people and that people would just follow me, and that was great. But that's kind of the only thing I would say about LinkedIn is, like, I'm very proud of the profile, but you have to remember, like, LinkedIn is still the only social media where you can add your own followers. All the other ones have to follow you, so like, that's always kind of a good thing to bear in mind. As I say, I can remember the point in time where I was like, okay, cool, well, actually I'm getting like between like 10 and 50 a week based on what happens on posts. So I kind of keep going like that. Changed it to follow then rather than connect, which is something that as a little tip for people, if you want to build a following, people are more likely to follow you than connect, because they're more likely to have you say, yeah, cool, you can follow me, but if I don't know you, I'm not always going to connect with you. So that's a little insider tip for you. But I think you just got to kind of look at it from a long perspective. Like, yeah, I can't tell you how many hours has gone into finding photos and doing research and trying to be consistent. And, you know, I mean, I don't play a lot of golf now, but when I was playing a lot of golf, I remember being on the golf course being like, oh, I need to post. Like, I need to post something on LinkedIn, which is ridiculous, but it's the sort of thing that goes into building that over a long period of time. And as I say, there was comfortably a period of about 3 years where, you know, maybe 2 is a bit shy, let's say like 10, where I didn't post because it was either like my birthday or I was on holiday or just, you know, I needed a break. But that made a massive difference. So, you know, I think even, again, I was trying to think of like points in time. I remember being at Oktra, I think, so that must have been 2022, and celebrating 8,000 followers.
I'm not there yet, so
you'll get there, don't worry. But it also, like, it means nothing, right?
Yeah,
like,
well, it does. Linking back to what I said earlier, it doesn't mean anything, just the raw number, but it's how you work with that number. So like, if you are trying to like drive something through it, like business, or if you're trying to achieve something off the followers and get an engagement, then that number doesn't really matter as long as you get the right personnel following you.
Sure. No, you are right. And I mean, there's some examples which I can give you of where it has worked and why it's been good. But I think I remember celebrating that 8,000 and being like, okay, that's really good. And, you know, now it's like 21,000 more people, and that's probably been about 3 years, so 2.5 maybe. But anyway, you know, that's been like a good growth. But again, it doesn't come from just sitting there being like, oh, I hope people follow me.
Yeah,
it's about graph, like what's interesting, what's different. The Friday posts were a big part of my strategy for a while, where I was finding like cool creative brands. So sometimes it would be like, I don't know, like one of the good ones was cups, but if they were designed in like pop culture, that sort of thing. Then it was, you know, like logos and all these sorts of posts. And I did that for years. And I remember getting to the point where I was like, I actually don't have anything else to post, because I'm going to all these places to find them. Like, yeah, done that. But that was really good, because it wasn't anything to do with offices, but it was still design related. And also, I think, you know, Friday's a bit of a dead day on social media. It was a good way of filling that up, to go, okay, well, I know that I've got one day of a week sorted. But yeah, that helped a lot in terms of growth and getting people to kind of looped into the design world, or like the curiosity world. And yeah, then kind of just going back to the regular stuff day to day. But just to pick back up on the numbers side of things, you know, probably like the best thing that's come out of it is the Samsung brand deal, which was pretty cool. Can
you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was a couple of years ago. Samsung were doing a new launch of their phone, laptop and headphones, basically just trying to like tap into the hybrid working world. So basically got picked up by them to do that, which was a 2-day shoot, which was like a challenge. It kind of got branded into in the end, where you were just looking for like the best places to work and like looking at different opportunities. And when I say opportunities, like in terms of environments to work in. So I think, you know, we ended up in like a library in Catford, and then we went to a riverboat in Paddington Basin, and then I think the girl that I did it with, she went over to a market somewhere. And like ultimately it was all about kind of hybrid working, but that all came through LinkedIn. You know, speaking to them about it, they're like, okay, well, yeah, we're looking for people that talk about hybrid working. You know, this is like sort of tapping into that influencer world of like, okay, who's already talking about this, what's their following like, can they kind of back up what we want to get out of this. So yeah, that was really cool. Got a bit of money, got a laptop, got a phone, got some headphones. So that was pretty good.
Do you reckon, and by no means do you have to go into this, but do you think as you were growing your following on LinkedIn, you were posting, do you think that you kind of got caught up in the obsessive culture of the following side of it, or were you merely just trying to post engaging, thoughtful content?
Definitely at a point, but I think, like, I don't now really. I think it's nice to see it grow. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, obviously I know loosely what it is, but not to the point where I'm like, okay, like I need to post something that's going to go viral to get followers. I think that you can see that sort of stuff. And again, like, I have a lot of opinions that are unpopular to hold, so I'm probably not going to share them. But I'm sure we've all seen the stuff on LinkedIn that we're like, I don't like that. Yeah. Like, that's been made into Facebook, or it's like I've seen that elsewhere, and it's just the same stuff that's just repeated and repeated. And it still performs, and that's because I think there's big problem with the LinkedIn algorithm, but that's all I'm going to say on that.
So I don't know a humongous amount about. I've only really just started using LinkedIn. I'd probably say this year, maybe like latter part of last year. I was very inconsistent with posting last year, and I just thought I'm going to have a real drive of it today. So I haven't actually looked into the LinkedIn algorithm.
Sure.
So is there any?
It's just, I think it's more just like the stuff it picks up on. So like people, there are some really good people that sort of relay this stuff in good terms, but a lot of it's now about education and kind of telling people. And you do a lot of the stuff already, like the stuff I've seen, particularly with your sliders. That's that type of thing, this educational content where people go, okay, if I follow this guy, what am I going to learn from him? Like, what am I going to understand? I don't really do that. I still tap into like kind of the inspiration and the design aspect, and that, you know, still does okay. But some stuff, like some of my better stuff in my own opinion, doing air quotes on a podcast isn't a good idea, is it? But the stuff I think is better isn't necessarily, doesn't mean it's going to perform well, but education stuff they seem to like, but it's more just like the selfies and the stuff that's like what is that even about? And it'll still do well. And you're like,
did you used to do the selfies?
I honestly reckon I must have done.
I reckon if
I've done more than 10, I'll be amazed. Like actual selfies, like non-contractual selfies, because I did have to do some for Samsung. Not many.
No.
It's just not me really, and like fair play if people want to do that, cool. Like I don't care enough to like say that's wrong. Like I just think that there's stuff that you can really chase a following for, but also like I think once you get to a certain following, you can post anything and it'll just do well. So, like, you know, some of the stuff, like if I posted like what Gary Vee does or what Chris Donnelly posts, it wouldn't do very well for me, but those guys have built like great audiences, and they're loved by their audience, so you know they're doing amazingly well. But that's a different ballpark to what I'm up to.
Tell us about so you mentioned earlier you were at Morgan Lovell, and then I assume you transitioned into Oktra then. Can you tell us about your time at Oktra, and then maybe lead into the Oktra podcast, which was Voices, right? Maybe test my memory then. But
I think it was Oktra Voices. Good. That is a good memory. So left Morgan Lovell in summer 2021, then went to Oktra as head of content. That was a great experience really. Oktra is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, D&B companies. Had a great exposure to like great people, great projects, great work, a great team, really well structured, really well driven, like really good move for me, to be perfectly honest. It was kind of like after a while of being there, I was like, well, what do I do now? Because I've kind of like got to the point that I thought I wanted to get to, and now I need to kind of keep myself motivated. But moving there was really good, just like really sort of honed in my skills, got like the benefit of like all the other stuff I'd been doing, and then going into there was like a platform that was ready to be like, okay, cool, well, use all that stuff, but like line up with our tools, what we know, how we can make things work, how we can actually attract business. And that was a really good experience. You know, I was there for a couple of years, some very, very talented people there, and I was able to kind of shape that strategy, and again kind of continue with the videos, step into podcasting.
And what were like the video side of things? What were they looking like then? Were they just like videos of the projects that Oktra were carrying out?
I think by then we were doing less case studies really. We were just sort of doing more like shorter stuff, like Reels style stuff, and kind of more like we call them like ad cuts, like shorter videos, 30 to 60 seconds, that showed a project quickly, and didn't go into like the weeds of like how the project was built and why it was great, but it just showed like a great space, and doing more of that sort of stuff. But again, you know, had like other bigger projects. You know, I said to you at the beginning about before we started, about Gymshark, and obviously humongous name, that requires something different. You know, that was a different opportunity. So, you know, going there, we did the drone video, which did really well. Ben posted that. Alfred, when he was still there, posted that. So that was great to see. That got some really good traction. And
did you head that up?
So I mean, in terms of like the creative on that, which I'll be perfectly honest, getting an FPV drone doesn't require a lot of creative, and worked with like the guys I use still now to get that right. And it was them that suggested actually the better way of shooting it would be this. But so like that, let's just take that video as an example, because otherwise I'll just ramble on about loads of stuff. Like if we go with the Gymshark piece, so that drone video was 2 minutes 14 seconds long, And what people won't know about that video just by watching it, because they'll go, oh yeah, that looks really cool, that's a cool space. So in there, all of the people that move are choreographed in that video. So we were literally there from 2 p.m, travelled up from London, got there at 2 p.m, we left there at midnight. They were opening the space the next day, so there was loads of stuff going on. So we just basically had to wait around for the one shot, because it's done as a one-er, it's done as a one take.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of the people in that are being orchestrated around, and I'm pretty confident I'm not in it, and that's because I'm running around being like, you go on the phone to someone, right, you start walking. And, you know, look, does that make the video any better? Possibly not, but it felt right to have it sort of activated and see the movement and see the levels, and it's a humongous, like, 120,000 square foot space, I think. If I'm wrong, don't quote me on that, but it's a big one. It needed to have something kind of going on, because also obviously it wasn't populated yet, we couldn't do that, so we had to kind of create our own thing. So yeah, from that side of things, that was very much a proposal of like, go and do a recce, here's what we think. I remember like the document there was broken down into like 30-second chunks of like what's going to happen, 10-second chunks, what's going to happen here. So it you know, that required a lot of effort.
But what I find interesting about what you said there is the amount of effort that goes into a video that I think I watched it, but I can't remember how long it was, whether it was a minute or 2 minutes long. The amount of effort and choreographing and planning that goes into it, to the point where you're running around telling people to move, stop moving, get on the phone. Whereas like from like the outside perspective, it looks like a drone's gone into a building. It's flown around a little bit. Like, I'm speaking very loosely about it.
No, you're right.
But it looks like a drone's been flying around a little bit, showing a really nice space. Like Gymshark, fantastic name, great project. But like the nuts and bolts behind the scenes, like you're explaining now, and it links us back to the conversation that we've had multiple times about podcasting as well. You know, like the nuts and bolts that go behind it is like, you don't see that. It just looks like we're on camera talking, but behind this is a lot, and behind that Gymshark video there's a hell of a lot going on.
100%. It's funny, like you are right though, like a lot of people look at that and go, that's a nice video, that looks good, that's a drone flying around.
And when was that, like 2 or 3 years ago? Because
that's a little while ago now,
because that was before the sort of time that we were doing like video content. So like I probably watched that video and thought, yeah, that's a cool video. But now we're talking about it, I'm like, it makes it even cooler, the fact that how much choreographing and how much effort and planning went into it. Yeah,
well, I was going to try and remember this, but I'm going to consult my notes.
You go for it,
because there is some maths which I'm not very good at.
And you don't want to be corrected on the maths.
No.
But you know, Gymshark is a humongous brand, and for you guys to carry out projects of that magnitude was obviously quite a big one for Oktra at that time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of their household names. Like, it's, you know, everyone knows Gymshark, and they've obviously just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think for them, they were in quite early with Gymshark. They kind of, you know, they were involved in their 3 projects I think they've done in Solihull. So they were not the size that they are now when they were first working with them, because I think their first project was something like 2017 or 2018 or something like that. But just on that video, so the video, as I said, is 2 minutes 14 seconds long. We worked out that we did 2 months, a week, 16 hours and 28 minutes of work to get into that. And there's like a bit of a slide as to why that works. So 20 minutes was a phone call, so that's why that's so specific. But we then translated that into the time of the video, and this is where it really highlights what you're just saying, is that for each second of that video required 2 hours and 48 minutes of work to make it happen. So it's like, it's a bit like Interstellar, isn't it? When they're on the other planet, time just moves and it's all relative and it's all weird. Like spending 2 hours and, well, basically nearly 3 hours of work to make a second of video is ridiculous.
But nobody watching it without it, unless you're in the industry as such, or people who create content, you would never guess that.
No, of course.
There's 3 hours worth of hard work as well.
Sure, and the other side of that as well with that video is that there's actually sound design in that video, but people won't appreciate that. So, you know, if it's of interest to anyone to go back and find this old stuff, is that as you fly around the space, we made it so that because it was empty, you know, that was a challenge. We're like, okay, well, we can solve that, move people around the space, but also as you fly around, you can hear like the different elements. So when you fly into the back, there's a moss wall. We kind of put some nature sounds to kind of make that more apparent as to what that was. As we fly through the office space, we have Zoom or Teams call sounds playing in the background. We have conversation like murmurs. You fly around, you have a few like swoops in there to make it like emphasize the movement. You go through the social area, there's like laughter and champagne popping and just all of this stuff that, to be honest, it's almost like more for me to go like, this is the best we can make this video. Like whether people really look at that and listen to it and go, oh wow, like what a great effort, it's kind of like by the by. But we did like a lot of work on that to make it as good as it could be, and you know, I'm very proud of that piece of work. And yeah, like nobody's really like in D&B's bother like sound design, like what's that, like why are we even talking about that in design?
It's almost
videos?
It's almost like you've created a mini film of a project. So like, you know, like the standard video footage you have of projects that companies do is just a video going through, maybe someone talking about it a little bit, showcasing a bit of B-roll with like, you know, moving clips as such of the project. But like you've almost done a mini film.
Sure.
By the sounds of it, the work that went in behind the scenes is probably of similar ilk to the work that goes, probably not similar ilk, but like the amount of condensed work, 3 hours for 1 second, is like stupid. It's like a film.
Yeah, no,
like a mini film.
And you know, you could say, you know, I think I've criticised myself for being, you know, overpowered and high production values and all that sort of thing, but I do think it makes a difference. Like,
massive difference.
I think that helps me separate myself from the rest of the industry, and you know, is probably a big part about why people like the stuff that I do, is that it's a very specific brand of doing it. But yeah, I mean, also finally just remembering on that video, like we were really struggling with what's the word, like stock audio, because there was only American stock audio. We're like, well, they're in Birmingham, so that wouldn't happen.
Doesn't sound right.
So we had to get some Brummy murmuring to go into it so that it didn't sound weird.
Well, it's random people.
But you know, going to that level is ridiculous. But as I say, I think that's kind of what
I don't think it is ridiculous. I just think you're holding yourself to a high standard.
Yeah,
and
sure.
like that's your renowned for, like content creation, marketing. So it's like a representation of you. So to hear that you went to that level means that obviously you care about your work.
Sure, and that's only one video, right?
Yeah.
You know, I can't even remember how many videos we made, but you know, obviously you talked about the podcast. A lot of effort goes into that. I think we were doing sort of like 40 minute to an hour episodes. That required work in advance to speak to the people, to say like, here's what we're going to talk about, what would you like to share, kind of getting that out of them.
So tell us about that podcast. So obviously you were at Oktra then, creating some you know, fantastic content about projects you guys were doing. So how did the podcast come about, and what was the stem of it as such?
I think it was mainly driven by trying to show people more. I think if you haven't already found this, everyone in D&B says it's about the people, and literally everyone says that. Like, I haven't met a single company that says, you know, because everyone knows that the designs are the same, we use the same suppliers, like everyone does the same thing really. It's the differentiator is the people. So it was a case of saying, okay, well, how do we give people a platform? How do we do that in a different way? And you know, lots of people use social media and sliders and all that sort of stuff, and that's fine, that's cool. We just decided to do it with a podcast. So what we tried to do, and I think we did well, was get a breadth of the business. So it wasn't just the designers, which I think is very easy to do in a design company,
and everyone does that,
and everyone does that, because usually the designers are the people you're trying to sell, but we weren't trying to sell anything. We were really just trying to give a true representation of what Oktra is like. And so we had, I mean, this is really testing my memory and it's not even that long ago, but you know, we had health and safety people on, we had sustainability people on, yes, we had designers, we had like more, maybe slightly more junior people, we had, you know, senior creative people, we had project directors, we had, you know, salesmen. I remember you had saying something about the Rob Gregory one, which was
I listened to that one. Yeah, that was a brilliant episode.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic episode, because at that time as well, I don't even know why, don't ask me why, but I got weirdly obsessed with WeWork and Adam Newman and how he created WeWork and how he grew WeWork.
Yeah.
To the point where I ended up watching like YouTube documentaries on him and watching like breakdowns of he's just a fascinating character, and like how I'm off topic completely now, but how he was like able to like hold an audience and like sell this what was essentially a real estate business as like a tech company, just fascinated me. So like to be able to hear, his name was Rob, right? Rob Gregory. Yeah, Rob Gregory. To hear who he carried out the WeWork projects, I think from the start maybe. Yeah. So to hear that was like fascinating for me anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, right, is that just because we're designing offices and commercial real estate and all that kind of, you know, the construction chat, there's some amazing stories, and you know, working with amazing businesses, like we've already talked about Gymshark and WeWork, like two humongous, you know, unicorn businesses, like billions of valuation within those, and there's loads of others as well that people have had great exposure to, amazing people, and have seen projects kind of develop and grow. And I think that was really what we tried to understand and get out was, you know, what's your involvement, what does that actually mean? You know, when we talk about sustainability, you know, what is that? When we talk about health and safety, like why is that important? Like why do we have a person that looks after that? And so yeah, really that came about from that felt like the most accurate way of portraying that business at that time. And I think, you know, we did, I want to say like 10 episodes maybe. And I think, you know, the other side of it is that people are, that's not their job, you know, they're not used to, they're not media trained, they're not used to being on camera, not used to talking. But I think we did, you know, a good bit of work there, and sure, it could have carried on, and I'm sure that conversation's been had, but, you know, the idea really was to give an insight into people at Oktra, and I think we achieved that.
How receptive were the people at Oktra to come on the podcast? Because you know what it's like. Well, this is your first experience being a guest, but like being on camera and microphone, sometimes it is quite daunting. So
it is 100%. I mean, relatively, and I think that comes from like the people skills. Like, if I had been less involved and like people didn't know who I was, and I'd been maybe less approachable, it would have been harder to do that. But there wasn't really, I can't really think of anyone really. If we said, look, we've found, like, we think that you'd be great to go on the podcast, here's why, we'd love to interview you, would you be up for it? You know, with a bit of kind of hand holding, questions answered, people were like fine with it. But, you know, I do think that comes from this like relationship building piece, that I think if you're going to be good at marketing, good at content, good at understanding a business and what you should be talking about and putting out, you need either to be that person or very well linked to the person that just gets exactly what's going on in the business. Because if you're removed from that, or you're not fully clued up, it will be very obvious. So yeah, I think, you know, luckily for me, I was able to kind of build a bit of a stature there in terms of who I was, and I could go and have those conversations with people that maybe I wasn't working with every day, but they would go, okay, cool, understand why, you've explained it well, sounds good, it's good for my profile, let's do it. So yeah, I think relatively like receptive. So yeah, not particularly difficult one to do.
And did that podcast was your first, was that your first podcast you did, right? So how did that excel your personal brand?
Do you know what? Probably not as much as you might think, and ultimately it was never about that.
But a byproduct of running a podcast, albeit you were hosting it, so you know you were giving your insights as well, but primarily you were trying to get the insights of the guest. Yeah. So, but like a byproduct of hosting a podcast and giving your insights is you do build your own personal brand off the back of it. Yeah,
I mean, I guess you can't say that I didn't, but I think because the focus was exactly that, was getting the stories out. It was more probably formative in terms of going, okay, like I can do this. I have the skills to research and interview people, hold a conversation and engage people.
Which is so much more difficult than it sounds.
Mate, 100%. But also, like, if you think about this as well, like technically I'm a marketer. So when I'm sitting in a room with project directors, pre-cons, health and safety people, sustainability people, all the other people that were on that, you know, BIM and digital technology, I can do that. You know, I can sit there and do that. I understand the industry enough to be able to do that, and that is a hard skill as well, is that understanding enough to do that was a good skill. So I think that kind of helped me go, okay, well, there is a thing here, there is an opportunity. But yeah, I think, you know, it's really hard to say like if there's like any one thing that like builds your personal brand. I think it's all like part. I talk about it as like a tapestry, say that like it's one of those things that you kind of add to and kind of keep going, and it might be a bit like patchwork quilt, but you know that's there, and actually now this is helpful and this brings in there. Is that, you know, it was just the next progression which felt right. It worked really well, and then has obviously led on to what I'm doing now with Workplace. So like it has been perhaps a non-traditional evolution, but now I'm where I'm at, it all kind of makes sense, it all kind of falls into place.
So tell us about Workplace. So you ran the podcast of Oktra, right? And then I assume that's kind of where the podcast ended. That was not because of that, but that was the end of your time at Oktra, roughly. And then that led into Workplace, which you were sort of planning for a little while, because I was following it. I'm looking forward to the episodes that you did release in the end. So tell us about, you know, like the reasons behind the Workplace 3000 podcast. I know everyone who's listened to it probably knows the actual podcast itself, but tell us behind the reasons behind it and what you wanted to achieve from it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of an interesting time, because I think by the time this goes out, the last episode might have been done. So kind of a weird
I might have to jump this to the front of the queue.
A weird way of reviewing it, but I'm happy to talk about it, because I've obviously already recorded the episodes. It's like, I think that with Workplace 3000, you know, first of all, Workplace is the business, is the brand. Workplace 3000 is an arm of that brand. It's the podcast, and with that is future workplace, kind of that classic topic that everyone loves to talk about, but what is it? Does it even exist? And that just kind of gave a flavour of like, okay, well, let's not make it too rigid and too serious. Like, can we create something that is a little bit playful? And so Workplace 2000 was born, and it's not a busted reference, which a few people have asked. It is just a case of like, that's in the future.
I've only just got that.
Yeah, no, exactly the same. It was said to me, I think it was Darren's episode, he was like, "Oh, do you like busted?" I was like, "What are you on about?" But obviously when you say it makes sense. Like, it was more just about like being far enough in the future where like you could say anything and it didn't matter. I think for me, Workplace 2000 and Workplace in general, we're very much focusing on education, inspiration, and like the creative side of the industry. Workplace and design and build, and even architecture to an extent, like all of these guys are there's so much stuff like under those umbrellas. Like, it's not just one thing. We're actively targeting that part of it. So when we talk about amazing offices and interesting spaces and cool stuff, that's just what we're choosing to do. It doesn't mean that we don't respect data. It doesn't mean that we don't respect talent acquisition and strategy and real estate and all that sort of stuff. Like, that all exists. That's just, if you want that, then that's probably not what we're going to do. We might do a little bit of it, but it's not going to be all the time. Like, what we'll show you is really amazing spaces. We'll give you access to brands that you perhaps haven't been able to get access to before. And I think really just trying to bring a bit of a different flavor to what it is to be an office, change the narrative, to look at it from a different perspective, make it interesting, that it's not just desks and white walls and boring stuff. There's a lot of amazing design, and it's influenced by strategy and workplace consultancy and data and all that sort of stuff. But I think for me, my focus with this is trying to make it accessible to people, make it easy to digest, because I think that is one failing of the workplace as a sector, is that you can make it very, very serious. You can turn off a lot of people, and you can create a lot of boring stuff. And I'm sure that there's people out there that understand exactly what I'm talking about, and I don't want to be that. So basically, that's why we do it the way that we do it, is that I think there's a different story to be told from a different perspective. And it's just trying to sort of tap into the core of design and show it in a really exciting way. So I mean, in terms of what the podcast ties into with that, is that talking about the future workplace, it allows us to speak to leaders within the industry. So we've had principals of big architecture practices from Gensler and Perkins and Will and Moser, and then also people that are like boots on the ground workplace people. So working for big global tech companies and working for brand names that we all know and love and use on a day-to-day basis. It just kind of it felt like an opportunity to give a perspective, a broader perspective, a balanced perspective on the workplace, rather than the same old names wheeling out the stuff that they've been delivering for years. And look, do you know what? Crack on. I'm not going to slag it off necessarily. I just want to do something different, because I think that's been done, and I think it's time to do it in a different way. So with our content, and that that's ultimately it. Like, I've now got like nearly 10 years of like D&B content experience under my belt. It allows me to form what I think is a good way of doing it, have a good social media following, which again kind of backs up that I do know what I'm talking about. So that's why it's kind of formed itself in this way, that it's not your standard corporate marketing. We're partnering with really exciting brands, and I think that's a good testament that what we're doing is kind of helping those companies solve some of their challenges, be it from getting people back into the office, that return to office debate. But well, look, we've got these amazing facilities. It's been presented in a way that people can go, actually, that is quite cool. Talent attraction. I know that Gale's using that video on their careers page. So, that's a cool thing to have achieved, that they've got a great asset and we've helped them kind of show it in a way that makes it interesting to them. So, that was really where, with the podcast, it allows us to go down that route. And then the video content, which, again, because we're kind of talking in weird timelines now, like Gale's has come out now, Squire and Partners as well, which is an architecture practice in Brixton, amazing building that they're in, and really just trying to showcase this amazing work. And then
you reach out to these people and say, look, I love your space that you've got, I'd love to present it, I'd love to showcase your space. and then you go into their space, show that I'm making it sound very easy.
Yeah, no, but no, you're right. So far, yeah, it's exactly what happens.
And then you share their space, and then obviously you put it out through Workplace. Another thing that I wanted to touch on, actually, I was going to speak off camera about this, but it'd be interesting to show the hopeful listeners out there who are listening to this, the nuts and bolts that goes behind doing a podcast. So tell us about your experience with the planning, the execution of the podcast itself, because there's a lot more that goes into doing a podcast, like we've already said, than just sitting behind a camera of 2 microphones.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, so let's just take Workplace 2000 again. This is probably a bit more interesting than just me just saying loads of stuff, right? So definitely benefited from doing Oktra Voices to go, okay, well, actually, by not having a format, by not having a thing that stays the same in every episode, makes it harder. Yeah. So when you just turn up and go, okay, cool, here's what we're going to talk about this, like, what do you want to talk about? Is this interesting to you? That's really hard because it puts a lot on the guests to go, don't know, like, I need to think of some stuff. So the format solved that. So the format is that we kind of took inspiration from Desert Island Discs and Room 101, bit of off menu in there as well if you listen to that. Basically, like 3 things that you would love to take with you to the future workplace and 1 thing that you wouldn't want to take. Everyone has that opinion, right? Yeah. Everyone can think of those things, be it really far-fetched. We have had some absolutely amazing answers where people have really thought about it and gone, this would be really good and solve a lot of issues if we did this. Yeah. And we've also had a lot more sort of basic answers, which are also absolutely fine. Like, it kind of caters to both. So that was a really good achievement to get to that point. But that didn't just come. Like, that was like, okay, well, that came from having that inspiration of like, okay, like what works, what do I like listening to, what's a good format, and just trying to make it work for Workplace. Because this is the other thing, is like, we're obviously in like a pretty weird niche, so we need to try and make it accessible, but you can't take everything from other sectors because it's just not always applicable. So that was a big thing, having that format, and that's been really, really good. We also added in the coffee element, and I did this, I think I did it by chance on like the first couple, and then what I realised, and I feel like this is a good thing to explain because for people that have listened to it, which, it's a decent number, it's not anything crazy. The reason we have that in there is it's a great leveler of all people, that you can get a real insight into someone. And I think I've said it a few times, like, it's one of those ones, it's a bit like a Myers-Briggs test, which is like, okay, the type of coffee that you have is probably like the type of personality you are.
Interesting point. What type of coffee do you have?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. So
stealing
I would have a flat white. It's just, I would have a flat white standard. Happy to have a decaf in the afternoon.
Okay.
Happy to do that.
If you were to guess my coffee, what would it be?
You're probably an Americano.
I am.
No milk.
Yeah.
There you go.
Black Americano. I don't know how to take that. I'm not going to ask why.
No, but I obviously I know your background. You like your fitness, so you like to take care of yourself. So that's why. But there you go. That's easy. But
so yeah, going back onto the podcast.
Yeah. So the reason we asked that is that everyone has an answer to that, and we've had people that go, don't like coffee. Yeah. Like, can I say that I don't like coffee? Yeah, great. Say what you want. Like, people like tea. Someone has said, I think they like Iron Brew or Dr. Pepper. I was like, all right. I mean,
fair enough.
It's a weird angle, but fine. But like, it's stupid, right? There is literally, we're not taking any data or insights from that, apart from everyone has an answer to that question, and it just allows them to, first of all, feel a bit more comfortable. It's the first proper question that we ask them. But also, it just kind of gives you an access into, I don't know, just like a bit of like a personality side of things. And, some of those answers have gone on for ages. We've talked about people being gluten-free and that they don't have a biscuit in the afternoon, but they do in the morning, and they like the ceremony of it. And, all of that sort of stuff that comes from like a ridiculous question. That was also a great addition to that podcast. But in terms of like actually like building outside of that, once you've got a name, which again, you should think about, because that will help you kind of form what you're going to be doing, and
which is harder. The name for this, it took me, I had to go for a branding exercise for it, to be honest with you, because I couldn't think of one for ages.
Well, it's not least for, it needs to be, if people see it, they need to kind of get a gist of it quite quickly, but also for you to go, okay, well, what I'm actually asking people, what are the type of guests I want in here, why is it interesting for people to listen to it? So I think it's a good name, like, and you have to take that time to think about it. But then it's the outreach, right? So there's a brief, people get sent a PDF brief, really going into like kind of behind the scenes on this now.
Yeah, go for it.
Get to see a PDF, go, okay, cool, here's how the episode will work, here's how much time loosely you need to prepare for, here's the things you need to do, here's some advice, here's where the location is. And all of that takes time and effort to go in to be like, okay, cool, bit of outreach. Hi, you do this. I know who you are. I'd love you to come on my podcast. cool, that might take 2 weeks for them to reply to. You know, not everyone's
well,
on
in your
LinkedIn
case,
as much
6
as
months,
I am. Oh yeah, all that. Yeah, we're not a great example, are we? And then, you know, then you've got emails back and forth, and you've got to line up diaries, then you've got to book the space, then you've got to book someone to come and be a producer. Can you do those dates? What times are going to work? Do they need to cancel it? Do they need to move it? So it's all that management side. And, you know, we were talking about it at the beginning, like, this stuff looks like two blokes sat in a chair and just saying a load of rubbish into microphones, but there is so much work that goes into it. And, you know, I can appreciate how hard it is. Also, the guests that you've got, you know, I'm probably one of the easier guests that you've got secured so far.
The only reason why you're the easiest is because you've done it.
Yeah.
So, like, obviously, when we had a pre-call, mine's probably a little bit more relaxed, the approach, than yours, because, who knows why, but that's just how I do it. But the pre-call with you was easy because it was almost like, this is it, and you're like, yeah, fair enough, I know that. So no worries, I'll sort the space, which thankfully you did. So like, you know how it is. Whereas like when I'm trying to explain it to other people, they think it's almost, or other guests I should say, that have come on or are about to come on, they're like, oh, it must be, they didn't say it, but they're obviously thinking it must be pretty simple, like you're just going to turn up, you're just going to set up, and I'm like, have you got a space? Should we get this space? I need a time, like repeating everything you've just said.
100%.
So you are probably the easiest guest I've had.
Yeah, sure, but that's fine. But, you know, when you're speaking to leaders of businesses, they're busy people, so trying to accommodate that is really hard. Also, really quickly before I forget, just because you mentioned it there, shout out to Space Made, specifically Space Made Beton, which is an exceptional co-working space on Goswell Road in Clerkenwell, Farringdon. No, I mean, all joking aside, thank you very much, guys, for setting this up, because I think, you know, we said about having the production value, being in a podcast studio, it's just way easier. Like you were telling me some of the stories that you've had on previous shows, and it's really hard. Like there's a lot of things to think about. So, you know, it's sure, you know, if you want to just have a microphone and you want to upload something to Spotify, you could do that really easily. But that's when you get into these microphones. These mics are really, really good. I like using these mics. They're quite expensive. But they make a massive difference to the sound quality. You know, you've got a producer here that makes it good, and you're relying on the fact that he's got that covered, so you can relax and have a conversation and make that as good as possible. So, yeah, you know, like, I think we've kind of come out of that, like, crazy time where, you know, there's a lot of podcasts, but there was a period of, like, COVID where everyone was podcasting and doing videos, and
I jumped straight on it. It was actually I did it with my best friend, not to make this about me, but he was sort of the stem of it and asked me if I wanted to do it, so I was one of those people who started it.
Sure, but the difference is, Cal, is that you have a capability of actually doing it, whereas a lot of people before were just like, oh yeah, I can buy a microphone on Amazon, I can make a video with my webcam. Luckily that's kind of like died away now, but for me, again, like, production value has always been important, and, you know, this gives us the best shot at making a really good episode. So I mean, anyway, like, I've talked about the podcast a lot there, but ultimately it's definitely not as straightforward as just going, let's do one.
And then there's the aftermath as well. Just to hear your experience about the aftermath. So you record the episode, and then you've got to get your release dates, and then how you know, like, frequently do you release? Because then you've got to get because that's something that we slipped up on my previous podcast. We didn't slip up as such. It was an important lesson. Was that, like, we had a backlog of so many recorded episodes because you've got to stay consistent with releasing. So, like, with this one, the reason why my one, and again, I'm speaking out of time as such, like with this one, the SQ.FT Stories, we're recording this, I haven't actually even released it yet, but you know, like, I've had to record so many episodes to make sure I stay consistent with releasing, but otherwise you're just, you're irrelevant if you're not releasing. So, like, there's the aftermath of, like, the releasing and like, you know, the short clips, the short form clips, and posting that as well. Yeah,
of course. I mean, also, like, it depends on what your capability is. So Oktra, that one was monthly. I think you're doing this as a monthly or bi-weekly. No,
bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly.
Yeah, bi-weekly.
Workplace 2000 is, you know, it's kind of like a limited run, but that's a weekly. So, like, by the time one's gone out and you've posted some of the clips from it, you're promoting the next one. So, like, it almost becomes disposable in a way that, like, you're really proud of this asset. Be like, okay, well, that's out now, I need to get the next one out.
I never thought of it like that.
You were saying about all the tagging, putting the copy, the captions, uploading. Even the process of uploading it is annoying, right?
It's like long.
It just takes time. So all of those things go into it. But, you know, if you're just, like, flicking through a LinkedIn feed, you might see a 30-second clip and be like, oh yeah, that was quite good. But, like, again, it goes back to the hours and the minutes that go into actually making that into a thing. But yeah, the distribution and the other side of it is also, like, a lot of effort, and it's a real sort of leveler when you do all that work and go, okay, like if it's going to be good, I'm going to have to stay consistent with it. So yeah, you just got to find a way that works for you though, right? Like for this is kind of like phase 1, should we call it, of workplace, and it's been really cool. Met some great people, been some good brand awareness, given us some good opportunities, and yeah, you know, we'll take a call as to, you know, what we do with it going forward. But obviously now the videos are coming out, we've got other content that, you know, we've been working on for a long time starting to release. So yeah, we'll just kind of see how it goes. But for the most part of this year, having Workplace 2000 as a weekly has been really good. So.
Yeah, I already know the answer to this question, but I want to ask it anyway.
Sure.
How important, not only with the podcast, but Workplace 3000, just as Workplace as a whole, like how important is the quality of the content itself? So like the video quality, the audio quality.
Yeah, good question. So from my perspective, really important. Like it really matters, mainly because that, again, I think is a differentiator. And there's a lot of ways you can make content, like you can make videos on your phone, right? Like you can do that, that's easy to do. But I think particularly from a sound quality perspective, but also that when you're going into like big companies, and again it's difficult because I don't know what's come out of this point, but like when we're talking about like famous companies that people know, and some of them might be, you know, have very high profile owners or investors or whatever, when you turn up to do a shoot, I think it looks better if you've got, you know, we've got a small crew, but you have a couple of people there, you have some good cameras. You know, the cameras we use are Reds, they're silly, you know, you can shoot, I think The Hobbit was shot on Reds, so like we're using like proper production equipment. But again, like I like how it looks, it gives the guys more control over the grade, they can make the colours look more realistic, and that's the difference in the detail, right? Is that's just how we do things. So I think it's important, but you know, the other side of that is, do people really care or notice it? Probably not always. LinkedIn is so bad at video that it compresses it so bad that it looks blurry. Also, just I think like when you're looking at on a phone or on social media, like the resolution obviously drops massively. Like we shoot everything in 4K, sometimes in 8K, but you can't process that through social media. So like, yeah, sure, there's a level of it being too powerful, but by doing it that way, like it means that we're not going, it would have been better if we just done it like that. Or actually, why do we save? I mean, again, like you're not talking about a lot of money. Like you might save like 250 quid by doing it with like a less good camera. Well, let's just do it with a better camera, because we know the results will be that much better. So yeah, I'm probably always going to have that view on having high production. And I think also as well, like when you're creating these assets and giving them to other people, that is a better value proposition for them to go, actually, yeah, this is really good. Like, you know, some of the stuff we've shot, people have been like, this looks like TV quality, like this is like Channel 4 stuff. I'm like, it's not, but the fact you think that is great, because that's what we want people to think. So yeah, that's kind of,
I knew that'd be on. I already knew that would be on.
No, well, of course.
I wanted to ask the question just because, you know, like there's obviously a lot of people who want to start creating content. Maybe a lot of people want to do a podcast. Maybe a lot of people who want to do like video content around their D&B business. So it's interesting to hear someone like your perspective of how important the quality of the content is before, like they need to have a think about what sort of quality they're going to go in at.
Do you know what? It depends. Classic answer, depends, right? So from my perspective, for building Workplace, for me, my profile, what I believe in, what I want, then that's how I would do it. Doesn't mean that's how you have to do it, because also some people might be like, I don't have like 10 grand to spend on a shoot. So how do I make that? So like, yeah, sure, you can use your phones. You can use GoPros, you can use DSLRs, you can use like standard cameras really to create the content. In some ways, I would actually argue though that that's not necessarily the focus. Like you could shoot something really great on a not great piece of equipment if you've got like the right idea, you've planned it well, the concept's good. I think 28 years later, the 28 Days Later sequel is shot on an iPhone 15. So like it can be done, but it needs to be written well. Like the idea needs to be good. Don't just like point your camera at something and just like kind of fan it around for a little bit and be like, that will do, like hopefully that'll get something good. So yeah, I think just a bit of planning really is actually where the focus needs to be. Like, what are you trying to shoot, why are you trying to shoot it, what does that get you at the end? And then, you know, if you've got, you know, budget barriers, then you can go, okay, cool, well we can afford to do it on this, all right, great, well let's just get started and do it that way. It's easy for me to kind of say this because I've kind of been through all these headaches and like I've kind of experienced this and I'm like out the other side of it. But content is just getting more and more important, and more companies are going to need to do it, and the companies that aren't doing it really should be, because they'll get left behind. And it's something that is taking its time. We've said before that it's quite an ancient industry for something that is so innovative and so creative. It's kind of lacking this, like, the marketing side of it being like really sort of current. And you look at other sectors, like media sectors and retail, and the stuff they're doing is mental compared to what we're doing. But it will get there eventually. It's just everyone needs to kind of catch up and play along.
Let's talk about that. So you've touched there on how archaic as such the industry is. So from like your perspective, who's someone who's been creating content in the industry, who has had some high profile roles at companies like Oktra's and Morgan Lovell's, and you've been creating content for these guys, like, what would you recommend to people who were, the guys that are stuck in the archaic times and the ancient times who don't create content? What would you recommend they start with and then go forward with in terms of content creation around their business?
Yeah, that's a good one. I guess there's a couple of different options you could go with. I think, like, one thing that you shouldn't do, don't just copy what someone else is doing. Like, that's one of my biggest bugbears with this industry, is particularly from a marketing perspective, one company will be like, oh yeah, they're doing that, so we're going to do it as well. It's happened to stuff that I've done. No one's necessarily going to know that. Like, I know it's happened. Like, what you can do with that, not a lot, but I think if you're starting out, try and find something that's different, because it's just so easy for people to copy that you might as well not do it if you're just going to do the same as someone else. But I think you just have to, it goes back to that point I made previously, though. You have to go back to, like, what's important to you, like, why are you doing it in the first place? So, like, if you want to show off your people, again, like, take the Oktra Voices example, that actually only happened because we felt that we weren't getting a good broadcast of the people that work there. Great, that solved that problem. So if you want to do that with video, look at that. If that's your mission, how do you solve that problem the quickest? If you are kind of clueless and you just know that you need to do it, then engage with someone that can help you do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting someone from outside of your industry to go, why are you doing this? Like, what are your examples that you like? Find references. I've done that countless times with content, is finding things and going, okay, that's a great bit of work. How do we translate that into design and build, and how do we make that, work for us? It's another process you can kind of go through. But I think, ultimately, you just don't aimlessly create content. It needs to fit into a strategy, it needs to fit into a campaign, it needs to be part of something else. Like, going back to your point about the consistency side of things, like, you can, sure, like, anyone can just make a video. Like, even the stuff that we've made, whether it has or hasn't been copied by now at this point in time, we don't own the rights to that. Like, you can make that, but we can release, I know how long we can release content for, because we've already done loads of it and we've already got the next stuff lined up. That actually being consistent with it is probably one of the biggest things. But I think it all just comes down to purpose, right? Like, finding the problem that you're trying to solve and, like, using media to fix that. Because there's nothing wrong with photos work really, really well. Like, if you want to do that, that's great. Don't spend loads of money on buying cameras or expensive microphones if you don't need to. I just think that from where I'm at, and again, like, when we're talking about scripts that we're writing, take weeks to write, and their iterations, and we're bringing in other people, and it's interviews, and it's complicated. Like, it does take time, so it just allows us to kind of execute that at a high level. But you don't need all that sort of stuff.
It's just interesting to hear it from your perspective, from someone who's created, like, cinema quality videos around the Gymshark, and someone who's run podcasts. So you've almost covered all aspects of content creation with our industry. So there's probably people listening who would value your opinion, because there's people out there who don't create any content and they're yearning to create the content, but they just don't know what to do. They don't know the route to go down or how to do it.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing, isn't it? Again, like, sort of touched on it there, like, just get someone that does, because there's also nothing worse than someone that doesn't know what they're doing trying to do it. And I think you can equally make videos, and again, I've seen them, that really turns you off from a brand. And you go, why am I watching this? Like, I don't like that. Like, it doesn't portray you in a good light. So find someone that can help you. Get someone that can make it good for you if you don't know how. It's like, as you can probably guess, I'm useless at anything like DIY. I've got the hands of a podcast, mate. I wouldn't be able to. I probably could just about put up a shelf, but it might take me 3 days to do it. I probably wouldn't do that myself. But, in the same way that people kind of can access this equipment and think, oh well, I'll just have a go at it. Just ask for advice. You ask me for advice, people probably ask you for advice now. Same way with me, like, if I can help, then I will. But there's lots of other people, not just me, in this world that make content. It's just that I think we're in a niche and an industry that there's not a lot of people that do those sorts of things, and so there's a very small amount of us that do this thing that probably end up getting asked, how do I make this into a thing? But like, I had it the other day of, I want to do a podcast, like, where do I start? I'm like, okay, well, what do you want to talk about? Like, what's it going to be about? And they're like, I don't really know. I'm like, probably start there. Obviously I'm kind of taking the mick now, but like, do it in a nice way.
Yeah, you're taking the bit, but because the fact that you've ran 2 podcasts and you've created them to a high quality level, it's actually valuable you saying that to people again who might be listening who want to create a podcast, because start with. And,
I think it's just a process you have to go through. I went through that process myself. I remember sat in Pret. I might look for it one day, like just a list of like 20 names of a podcast. Like, doesn't sound like a podcast. That sounds rubbish. That's weird. That's stupid.
I hope you don't look at mine and think about that.
No, not at all. Like, but you come back to them, right? You go, okay, well that one feels right. That's the right thing. Okay, cool. That allows me to kind of fit into this format. And like, it is a process. And if I'm going to have a conversation with someone that needs help, like, you got to start right at the basics. You can't just jump straight in and be like, okay, I'm going to do a podcast. Okay, cool. Well, what's it going to be about? Where are you going to shoot it? Have you got any money to put behind it? When's it going to go out? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? What are the other platforms that you want it to be on? How does it actually work? What's a staging platform for you to get that distributed? There's huge amounts, not just like the bit sat in the chair talking. And even that, you still need to think about what you're actually going to say, because you can't just sit here and just, some of it comes out, but you need to obviously have things you want to call back to. So if this is going to be like a rallying call for people to do stuff or help kind of do stuff, definitely get started. And the stuff that you do at the beginning will be rubbish. Like, I've done it. I dread to think about the videos that I made in lockdown with various people. Like, they were probably absolutely terrible and edited poorly and the lighting was bad, whatever, and it's irrelevant really. It's just part of the process, right?
I've had some shockers. I was talking to Joe on the way up at that. I think the previous podcast I did, I think I was, because we were like sort of like budget restrict, sorry.
Yeah, of course.
So like, I was doing like the camera setup, and I think that the very first video that I did with somebody, we only had one camera, and we spanned it across 3 people, and like, I set the camera up lower than like the head level, so like the camera was looking up, and like where I was sat, like half of my arm was in it and half was out. So like, when I was leaning back, I was going out of the shot and coming in, and because it wasn't multiple camera, you couldn't hide it. So I was watching it like,
and that will happen. That's just how it goes, right? And that's how it allows you to go on and do things differently and learn from those mistakes. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just, get some advice, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, and if it's not very good, that's fine, just do it better the next time. And like I say, I think that's just typical of the creative process, right? That's just like a lot of things. But I think just getting started, but just have the right reason behind it is, probably the message to take away from that.
So how about the future of the content? So, you mentioned 8-9 years ago, people were recording video case studies, and that was the thing then. So like, now we are where we are in 2024. Where do you think content around our industry might get to? And like, how do you think people are going to start producing it? Because it's difficult to think about where it can go now, because people are, creating cinematic videos of projects, podcasting. Like, where do you see it getting to at some point in the future? And I'm not stealing your idea of content 3000.
No, sure. I think that there'll be more in-house like content creation. I think that at the moment, I still don't know. There's probably a couple of firms that maybe have that at the moment, but like, not to a level that's production. So there's an architecture practice that I've been chatting to recently. They have in-house production. They're global. They do some crazy stuff, but they have a desire and a need for that. I think, on a lower ground level, it probably makes sense for London D&B firms to have a content creator that's, that's their job. They have a ability on cameras, they can edit, they can, put tracks to videos, and they can flip them around in like a couple of weeks max, rather than having to use an external agency, having to brief that in, and that slower process. And probably just doing stuff like day to day and just showing like what the business is like. I don't know if you ever saw the vlog that the Goat agency did a couple of years ago. It was huge. I think they brought it back, but like, when they first put it out, it was like revolutionary, because they were spinning it around really fast. They had a couple of guys that, a guy presenting it, a guy editing it. And I think they were doing a weekly episode, which was great because it kind of gave a window into the business. It shows you what they were up to. I might even, like, when I'm saying weekly, surely it can't have been daily. I think it was daily.
Was it?
Yeah, even saying that now, I think it was daily. It was ridiculous.
There's a lot of effort behind that.
A huge amount of effort.
Yeah.
But I remember speaking to the guys, went to an event one time and they were there, and speaking to them about it, they were like, we just get absolutely flooded with applications like CVs, because people want to work here because they see what it's like, they see the people, they see the culture. And I think that will become more of a thing, not necessarily just in D&B, but also like more broadly for businesses. Is like, if you're gonna have to be in the office, people are going to need to feel like they want to be there, that they're going to want to be attracted. And so the companies that don't portray that in a really good light are going to be the ones that people go, well, I don't really want to work anymore, I want to go and work there instead, it looks way better. So I think in-house stuff will get sort of more and more and have those skill sets. You might even have like a content team, like a 2 or 3 person content team. Someone's doing the writing, someone's doing the planning, someone's doing the distribution, and then you've got someone that's shooting it as well. So that could definitely happen.
But it's funny listening to it for our industry as such, because we're made up of core teams like projects and sales and marketing, and we're now talking content, like a team of content creators. So there's some like older founders out there of these D&B companies who are thinking like, it's crazy to think that I'm eventually going to have to get a team of content creators into the business. Yeah,
for sure. And I don't think there's any way around it. Like, you don't have to do it, but I think that companies will do it, and I think they'll see the benefits of that. I think looking at the workplace side of things, that's very much in its infancy. I would love to get that on TV. I'd love to do something big like that, and whether it's us or something else happens, I think that TV feels like the next place to kind of go for video, which I kind of sort of say that as if it's not a big deal. It would be really, really hard. But, we've kind of got ideas as to how we would do that and how that would work, and we've been looking at that for a while. That would be a huge achievement to kind of push it to an extent where it's like, it's on a streaming platform or a domestic channel, which, as I say, it's something to aim for sure, and whether that happens or not. But building media eventually allows you to kind of have those conversations, and if you can do it in the right way, then channels will be interested, right? They have a huge need for content, and it's probably a bit of a stretch to think about it now, but like, business content hasn't really been done, and there's a lot of very interesting companies around the world that, if you could actually get an insight into what it's like to work there, could be really interesting. So I don't know. I think that's definitely more of a far-fetched idea, but one that's definitely in my mind.
I mean, the far-fetched ideas are the ones that usually happen, though. That's the thing, because like today, we don't know what's going to happen, and 10 years ago, 10-15 years ago, you would never have thought that sat on microphones with a video would be the thing.
100%.
So like, what we're thinking might be the thing in 10-15 years time, that you say is far-fetched, is probably going to be a...
Yeah, for sure. No, you're right. And I think, someone's got to think of it, right? Like, if I think it's just funny, like, thinking like some people are probably like debating whether to get a TikTok channel as a D&B company, and someone else is saying like, I don't know, there'll be a D&B TV show.
Yeah, it's
mental. A bit mental.
That
but
is mental.
It could easily happen. I think there's I think there's a lot of interesting changes that are happening with like the commercial space. Like, I feel like a lot of other sectors have kind of had that kind of, I mean, particularly like residential is the example I always give. Like, luxury residential is huge, and there's TV shows and Instagram pages and YouTube channels that have like millions of followers, but no one's really covered that for commercial space and for office space. And I don't know, like, we use companies like all their platforms, so Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Google have got amazing offices, but do you know what they look like? No, not really. No. But there's definitely something there.
There's a niche there for sure. You are right. Like, when you look at the residential side of things, I've been watching like the Ryan Serhants and these guys for years, and everyone does, because it's accessible for everybody to watch, and everyone's interested in it. So the commercial side of things is probably untapped. And that kind of leads me nicely into like the final question I wanted to ask you was, what's like the plans for you? I know you've mentioned the plans for Workplace anyway, but what's the plans for you going forward?
I think for me is to keep growing Workplace, get that to a point where we have more of a stature in the market. Like, we are pretty much like a startup or a new brand. It's kind of, we can move in lots of different ways, which is great for us, but it's also bad in terms of it being like, what exactly is it that we do? I think we're going to really hang our hat on being a workplace and office design content brand first and foremost. Really sort of tapping into the media side of things and working with companies, and potentially even with the designers and the design and build companies, the architects that are involved in that. That might be something that comes out of it. But I think really just trying to push that to everything that it can be. Maybe that's getting on TV, maybe that's setting up events, or I don't know, really, like awards, like whatever. Like it could be lots of things. So I think just trying to like move that along, keep building profile wise, keep making sort of social media a focus. I think that's probably one of the other things that will kind of become more, and it already has really for lots of design and build companies, is that years gone by it would have been like, marketing and just sort of like colouring in, but it's actually marketing now are bringing in like millions of pounds worth of opportunities into a business, and people need to kind of sit up and listen to that. So I think that's really where I want to be, is kind of just keep growing the brand, be able to create content that's interesting, kind of pick up where we've started. Been amazed really at the response that we've had from companies that have allowed us to kind of come in and help them and work with them. So I think kind of moving that forward, and I mean, at some point probably do less of the doing. At the moment I'm doing the outreach, I'm doing the writing, I'm doing the presenting, I'm doing some of the the production. Probably do less of that stuff really would be good. I love like the whole being on camera side of things. Like it's great fun. It's very tiring, it's very consuming, but maybe doing 1 in every 3 rather than every 1, or 1 in every 5 would be cool. So I mean, I think I'm kind of like bedded into this industry now. Like it'd be very difficult for me to go and do anything else. Yeah,
that's what you're known for, right? That's what I know you for.
Well, exactly. Like it's become like very linked to me, and my identity is like this workplace design content. So I think probably not going to go anywhere anytime soon, which is good for me, probably bad for some other people. But just kind of keep going on the vein that we've started, and hopefully do more ambitious projects and more creative stuff as we go.
No, mate, I think, you do a cracking job, to be fair, and like someone who's hosted 2 podcasts like successfully and doing all your video content, you definitely are at the forefront of the market from that side of things. Well done on everything you do.
Cheers.
Mate, thanks so much for coming on today.
No, not at all.
It's been very
flown, by the way. That has flown.
Well, you should know, mate. You said, I suppose you're sat on the guest side, so it's a bit different.
Usually I'm thinking, bloody hell, when's this going to end? That's
I've been like that,
doing,
I haven't really. But mate, it's been fascinating for me to get into your mind of like the content side of things, the marketing side of things, because we've mentioned that not many people are doing it nowadays, and there's more and more people who want to do it, but they don't really have a clue of how to do it. So I hope people take value from this and take value from what you said today. So firstly, mate, thanks so much for coming on. And you never know, could be around too in a couple of years' time.
Fingers crossed. Well, potentially you'll be on Workplace 3000 in the future. So let's see.
Maybe, mate. Maybe if I'm lucky, mate.
Cheers, Gal.
Thanks so much. Come on.